Welcome to Branding Room Only, the podcast where your personal brand gets a front row seat. I'm Paula Edgar, and if you're here, it's because you know your brand isn't just about what you do. It's about how people experience you. In each episode, you'll hear stories, strategies, and lessons from leaders and influencers who built their brands and made their mark. And I'll share the tools you need to do the same. Let's go. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Branding Room Only. So my therapist says something to me that I come back to often. She says, growth begins where comfort ends. And every time she says it, I have a reaction. Part of me agrees immediately. Yes, growth requires stretch. Growth requires friction. Growth requires discomfort. And then another part of me says, but I worked hard to get comfortable. I like comfort. I worked hard to build stability. I work hard to build competence, and I work hard to get to a place where I am not constantly scrambling. That probably resonates for you, right? So when she says growth begins where comfort ends, I sit with that tension because I do believe we should always be a little uncomfortable, not in chaos, not in survival mode, but in motion, in expansion, in awareness that we are all still evolving. And that brings me to complacency. Comfort and complacency are not the same thing. Comfort can be earned. It can be grounding. It can be healing. Complacency is quieter, slower, more subtle. Complacency is when your growth stalls, but you don't notice because things feel fine. Complacency is when you stop sharpening your skills because your current level works. Complacency is when you assume stability equals permanence. Now, let's layer personal branding into this. When you think about your brand, especially during a season of comfort, what are you doing? Are you still refining it? Are you still clarifying it? Are you still expanding it? Or have you unconsciously decided that because your job feels stable, your brand can sit still too? Look, there are seasons in our careers where we are clearly in expansion mode. You are learning, stretching, raising your hand, building something new. You can feel the growth happening. And then there are seasons when you hit your stride. You like your team, you like your role, you feel competent, you feel valued. You're not chasing the next thing. And for some people, that is the goal. Stability, predictability, meaningful work without constant reinvention. And there is nothing wrong with that desire. But here is the nuance. Even in a season of maintenance, your personal brand requires maintenance. So even when you are not trying to grow outwardly, you still need to grow internally. Because the world does not stay still just because you feel settled. Leadership changes, industries evolve, technology disrupts, hello AI, markets tighten, politics shift, you know this. And sometimes those shifts are dramatic and visible, but sometimes they are quiet and incremental. Either way, they happen. If your personal brand only lives inside your current organization, your exposure is high. If your relationships are primarily internal, your potential mobility can be limited. If you have not articulated your value beyond your title, your leverage is certainly lower. And this is where complacency becomes risky. Comfort says, I feel grounded here. Complacency says, I don't need to build beyond here. And personal branding at its core is ownership. Ownership of what? Your narrative, ownership of your expertise, ownership of your relationships, ownership of your visibility, and yes, ownership of your growth. And when I talk about investing in your personal brand, I am not talking about performance. I'm talking about discipline, a discipline of staying current, a discipline of staying visible enough, a discipline of nurturing relationships without an immediate agenda, a discipline of documenting your wins. You know, I love that. A discipline of knowing how to articulate your value clearly and confidently. And so I want to make this practical for you. Imagine tomorrow your role disappears. Not because you did anything wrong, not because you failed, just because circumstances shifted. How would you know how to describe what you do in a way that resonates beyond your current employer? Could you call 5 people who would take your call and meaningfully support you? Do you have a body of work thought leadership, or visible contributions that reflect your expertise? If the answer feels shaky, I don't want you to feel shame. I want you to take that as information, because information is feedback and it allows you to recalibrate. And there's another layer here that I think is important and I want you to reflect on. Sometimes comfort can become an identity. You tell yourself, I am not that ambitious. I'm not trying to build a platform. I am not trying to be known. And that may be true. I hope not, but that may be true. But growth is not synonymous with ambition. Growth can look like determining your expertise. Growth can look like refining your communication. Growth can look like building confidence in rooms you already occupy. Growth can look like expanding your perspective, even if your title does not change. So when my therapist says growth begins with comfort, and I do not interpret that as abandoning stability, I want to tell you a story. A few years ago, someone came to me in a bit of a panic. Very talented, very competent. They had a solid career, great product, and happy. They were very happy where they were. But they had ignored LinkedIn for years. No updates, no thought leadership, no clear articulation of their expertise. The connections they had were mostly people they had worked with directly, and even those were cold because they had not been on the platform. They were comfortable, they were respected internally, and they were busy. And then something shifted in their organization. A restructure, a leadership change, and then, yes, uncertainty. So suddenly they needed LinkedIn. Suddenly they needed visibility. And suddenly they needed to articulate their value and reconnect with people. And here's what they said to me in that first conversation. I wish I had taken this seriously when I didn't need it. And that line stays with me. Because personal branding works best when it is proactive, not reactive, when it is consistent. Building your presence, your network, your clarity about your value when things are good, it feels optional. But when things are uncertain, it feels urgent. And urgency is always harder than having been disciplined in the first place. Let me give you another story. I worked with someone in a personal branding strategy session who was genuinely happy. They were thriving, had strong client relationships, strong internal reputation, and they felt secure. And then their firm merged. And if you've ever experienced a merger, you know what that can do. That means there's new leadership, new politics, new hierarchy, new faces, new internal competition, and new uncertainty about positioning. And what this person realized very quickly was that their internal reputation did not automatically transfer into the new firm structure. So they had to now reintroduce themselves. They had to articulate their expertise. They had to think about how they were perceived in a broader market context. And yes, they had to get more intentional about visibility beyond their legacy client circle. Yes, they were still talented, still capable, still respected, but the environment had shifted. And suddenly their comfort required recalibration. When we worked together, the conversation wasn't about becoming someone different. It was about figuring out how to strengthen what already existed and making sure they had a strategy to be visible, strategic, and yes, portable. That is personal branding in a season of disruption. Now, here's the question I always ask. Why wait for disruption? Why wait for the merger? Why wait for the restructure? Why wait for the layoff? Why wait for the political shift? Growth does not require chaos, but it does require intention. And that is where I want to connect the dots, right? Thinking about what season you're in. Are you a season of orientation where you're stretching, building, or are you in a season of maintenance where you like where you are? You're not chasing. Maintenance is not laziness, but maintenance still requires maintenance. Like I said before, you need to sharpen. You need to build because the market does not freeze just because you feel comfortable. So what do? You think about making sure you are always reflecting on what my therapist says. Growth begins where comfort ends. What I hear now when I think about that is that there should always be a small edge of stretch, not chaos, stretch. A new skill, a deeper articulation of your expertise, a broader network, a more refined message, a slightly more visible presence. Even if you never leave, even if you stay in the same role for 20 years, even if you are completely satisfied, because satisfaction does not eliminate responsibility. Here is a simple gut check. If your role disappeared, would people know what you're exceptional at? Are you able to clearly articulate your unique value propositions? If any of that feels unclear, it's not failure. Again, like I said before, it's feedback. So this week, I want you to create a little intentional discomfort. I want you to update one platform. Yes, LinkedIn. I want you to reconnect with 3 people. I want you to write down 3 recent wins and, of course, the impact and results they produced. And I want you to identify one skill you have that keeps you relevant 5 years from now. That edge, that push beyond comfort is where growth lives. You do not have to abandon stability. You just cannot assume it will carry you without reinforcement. Comfort feels good. Complacency feels quiet. And the difference between the two often determines whether you are prepared or scrambling when the environment shifts. And the environment always shifts. Being strategic here is ownership of your personal brand. And that is how you stay powerful, even when everything around you changes and even when everything around you stays the same. So with that, my friends, I want you to remember to stand by your brand, and I'll see you next time in the branding room. Bye. That's it for this episode. I appreciate you hanging out with me on Branding Room Only. Now, please do me a quick favor. Head over to ratethispodcast.com/branding so more people can join this conversation. And make sure to stop by paulaedgar.com/events to see what's next. Whether I'm live, online, or in person, I'd love to see you there. See you next time in the branding room. And until then, stand tall, shine bright, and always stand by your brand.